Jennifer's asking if a family meets the income requirements and some of the children have an IEP as well, but some do not. Is it possible that some of their children might receive the ESA while the non-IEP children do not? I would hate for, well, that's a good question.
Yeah, no, it is a great question. If you meet the income eligibility, all your children all your children will be eligible. So it's an either or. So if your child has an IEP, you do not have to meet the income eligibility. And if you meet the income eligibility, you do not have to have an IEP. So thank you for clarifying that.
Fatima is asking, what if you have one child with a 504 plan and the other child has an IEP?
Unfortunately, right now, the way the law reads is that it's just IEPs. There has been some discussion, well, many people making comments to the treasurer's office about this concern, and also another concern about an ISP, which is what children have in a private school. It's the equivalent of an IEP. And right now, the way it reads on the treasurer's website is that it's just IEPs for students coming from public schools. So there may possibly be some changes in this going forward. So, again, still some unknowns, but if you're signed up for our updates, we will definitely address this piece, this question. Hopefully soon we'll have answers about that.
There's some of the eligibility questions, like if your child attends a private online school, would that qualify? Unfortunately, the answer is no. They need to have attended a public school in the previous 12 months. My son is in kindergarten and will be in the first this upcoming year. Does he qualify? And we think that he should qualify, right?
Yes, from what we understand, any child coming in at kindergarten or first grade does not have to have attended a private school prior. There have been questions about the first grade part,
Right.
because in the state of Missouri, you're not required to send your child to kindergarten. So some people were interpreting that to mean that if your child has never been in school and their first experience in school is first grade, that's, they would qualify for that reason. And they were thinking possibly if you were in a private school currently in kindergarten that you might not. We haven't really heard otherwise at this point. So at this point, we're going with any child going into kindergarten or first grade. But again, I hate to make any promises until we get further confirmation about that.
Right. People are asking about, is there a limit on how many children within a house can apply and or be accepted?
There is no limit. And I should add on with that as well. What we understand is that once your students qualify, they will qualify all the way through 12th grade. So all of your students initially, if they qualify, they stay on. And then, if they, for some reason, grow out of their IEP, if your income level changes, some of the other eligibility requirements change, that your child will be able to continue their education. Because, people move all the time, their incomes change all the time. And it was never intended for children to be bouncing back and forth between public and private schools or homeschool and public.
This is a tough one, Cece. Steve is asking if our daughter going into third grade were to begin at a private school this upcoming school year, even if we did not receive the scholarship, although we qualified, would it make us unavailable for the subsequent, or ineligible for the subsequent school year? And I think the answer is probably.
Yeah, if you're not utilizing this program, if I'm understanding correctly, if you're not utilizing this program this coming year, you're in private school and you're in private school for the full next school year, and then trying to apply to receive the funds the following school year, your child would have had to been in a public school at least one semester during that year.
Right. Yeah, and that's what Nick responded. Are there any other open questions? Darlene is asking, does it apply to students that are homeschooled? And Nick is typing that answer. I wish I knew what he was saying. Does it apply to students that are homeschooled?
If you're currently homeschooling, you still do have to meet that same requirement of attending a public school for one semester prior.
Okay.
So that is the caveat. Again, these are all things we would love to change in future years, because I know that's a big frustration. Many homeschoolers never want to experience even one semester in a public school. That's why you're homeschooling. So, but I would like to kind of just add on while we're talking about expanding the program, that it will, even without a legislative change, there are a couple ways that it continues to expand on its own. So it's currently capped at 25 million, but it's set to grow to 50 million. So that will eventually double the number of scholarships from 4,000 to 8,000. And then in addition, the dollar amount, the scholarship amount, the $6,375 is based on the state adequacy target. So that changes from year to year. So those funds will increase from year to year as well. And then I don't know if I mentioned this, but if you don't utilize all of your funds in the first year, for example, your private school is willing to accept your student for less than their tuition amount because of their own scholarship program. So for example, maybe you're only utilizing $4,000 out of the over 6,000. You can either use those remaining funds for additional expenses, or you can save those funds and they will roll over year after year. Often parents are trying to save up money, understanding that a high school is more expensive than an elementary or a middle school.
I just had a question. I lost it. It got answered. If my student attended a public school in the past, but now attends a charter school, will they still qualify?
Yes. So a charter school is just another type of public school. So under the law, any charter school student is able to utilize these funds.
Is the one question that we haven't answered? It sort of highlights the situation. It just says if you already attend private school and one of the eligible expenses is for private school tuition, how does a student ever meet the requirement for attending a public school? And of course, they don't.
Right.
Unfortunately, it is one of the realities of legislation. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah, I know a lot of families who are making major sacrifices to have their kids in private school, and it feels very unfair to not be able to receive these funds. So
yeah, and Julie Collins is basically a statement, which is sad but true. So she's saying, so unfortunately, if we pass the 1 year mark passed in a public school in order to qualify, we would have to return our child to a public school in order to return our child to a private school, private special needs school to qualify. Yeah, that's not funny. It's sad. But that's the kind of, yeah. Go ahead.
unfortunately, that is the case. I know not many parents are willing to do that, although I have heard in some cases, I mean, some families are going to be doing that. So
Terry's asking, I know you said once the child qualifies, the child will qualify until 12th grade, but do you have to apply every year? And what's the answer there?
that's a great question. It won't be a matter of applying in the sense that you have to show eligibility every year, but I'm sure there'll be some sort of process where you'll be submitting some sort of renewal so that you'll indicate that you want to continue in the program and continue to receive those funds. But we really have no idea what kind of paperwork that might entail. It might just be a simple form with a checkbox saying, yes, I want to continue on. But we don't believe you'll have to submit anything about your income level or any of the other requirements to qualify.
Right. And just to totally clarify, Jennifer asked the question, just so people are square on this. If a child is currently in a public school, receives a scholarship, and then uses it to pay private school tuition, can they then get the scholarship in future years? Oh, that just disappeared. Can they then get the scholarship in future years, or is it only for 1 year at a time? So then they would have to go back to public school and get the scholarship again.
So you're asking if, I'm sorry, I think because I was looking and it disappeared as well. So the question is, you just have to have attended a public school for one semester prior to the very first year.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just so we're clear on that, Jennifer. So yeah, just once you get into the ESA program, and as long as you keep reapplying, your child should keep getting the scholarship. I'm not even sure what this one means. What if the public school district will allow the child to return for ESY only under the past IEP? Will that be considered appropriate qualification? Oh, extended school year, ESY, extended school year.
Oh. Gotcha. So only under past IEP will that be considered appropriate qualification? It has to be a current IEP, or an approved, actually it's how it's written currently, an approved IEP by your school district. So as far as where that IEP is in its process, if it has to be current, if I'm understanding this question correctly, if you're coming from a public school with an IEP, I don't think anything else matters at that point. Is there a program? Oh, at risk of losing funding. We'll have to continue to fund the program year after year. This is not proven to be an issue in other states. I mean, there is a very high incentive for donors to keep donating. When you receive all of your money back in your state taxes, it's kind of a no-brainer for folks. And then there is always the possibility of some legislation. I'm sure there will be people who file legislation, but I don't believe that's going to get passed. As soon as this program is established and it's obvious that it's very beneficial to families, it is extremely unlikely that this program will go away or be reduced down in size. And then there was a question about EAOs. I think maybe it's gone now that I'm looking at, but there's another one here. Any information on how to set up an EAO. So if you're interested in becoming an EAO, that application timeline has already passed. And I'm guessing that in future years, there will be an opportunity for new EAOs to get on board. But I don't know if I know quite the answer to that. I don't know, Peter, if you have a better sense on.
No,
You see, Cece, this is Nick. Yes, they will have an annual application window for EAOs, and I believe that will be in December every year. So there'll actually be 2 windows this year to apply. One currently right now is to get the program up and running, and then one at the end of the year for the 23-24 school year.
Right. Thank you, Nick.
Julie's taking a second stab at her question.
Oh, I see. I think I understand your question now. I believe, actually, I don't know if I know the answer to this, but I guess you're asking if once you're in a private school, would you be able to come back, like, for example, like summer school or something along those lines? I don't believe so. But I do know that in a private school, there are opportunities to access some, like, for example, if your child is coming from a public school with an IEP, if you go into a private school, those private schools have a relationship with the local school district to where you can receive some supports from the public school district. But I don't know that I've heard of any private school students being able to participate in any activities or summer schools or anything like that.
I'm sorry, Cece, there are 2 that have just come in.
Okay.
One is, do you have to live within the city limits, not the county? And so that is kind of dependent upon where you are living. So if you are qualifying based on one of the cities that has a population over 30,000, then yes, you need to live within those city limits. If you're qualifying based upon living in a county with a charter form of government, then anywhere in the county qualifies. So for St. Louis County, for example, you may live in a city that has a population over 30,000, or you may live in the county. Either way, you would still qualify. And then another question is, does it have to be 1 semester in a Missouri public school? We moved from Montana mid-semester, so they attended half of the semester in a Missouri school. I believe the requirement is just a public school for half a semester. So if you are moving in from out of state, it is as long as you have been in a public school for a semester, then you should qualify. Audrey asks, our daughter currently attends SNAP at Lindbergh School 2 times a week. She attended public school in 2nd grade, then needed to move to private for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Does her SSD, IEP, Lindbergh SNAP program meet the criteria for attending at least 1 semester of public school? And unfortunately, Audrey, at this point, we think that that probably will not meet the criteria. We are working as hard as we can to try to expand how they view ISPs and IEPs, but currently at this point, it looks like the treasurer's office is requiring a strict IEP and that a student have attended for a full semester at a public school beforehand. Krista asks, are there only certain private schools that take these funds or all? And the way the rules are worded at this point is that schools can accept these funds if they meet 2 criteria. The first criteria is that the school has to be an accredited school. And there's a wide range of accrediting bodies that the treasurer's office is using to ensure that. And then the second criteria is that the school be approved by at least one of the EAOs. And we are working at CEAM to identify as many private schools that are accredited in the state and trying to make sure that all of those are hooked up with at least one EAO and will be approved. But if the school you're looking at is a very small school that does not have accreditation, then unfortunately these funds will not be able to be used at that school. Dan Decker asks, when sending the money into the EAO, can the contributor designate which school they would like the funds to go to? No, unfortunately you can't, but there are going to be a number of different EAOs, and some EAOs are going to be working more closely with some schools than other schools. And so you can kind of do that by deciding which EAO that you want to contribute to, if you contribute to an EAO that works with the school that you want to try to support. But that EAO is also required to use any funds that are contributed to help students that might want to go to other schools. Do we have to apply every year to get continued funds? No, at this point, there's going to be some form of recertification process with the EAOs, but until the EAOs are formed and actually figure out what that process is, I can't really tell you exactly what that process will entail. But the intent of the law, both in the writing of the laws and in the rules, is that once you receive a scholarship, you should be able to renew it every year without going through the application process again. Again, I don't know exactly what's going to be required to be certified at that point each year, but most likely you should be able to redo it without any issue. There was a similar question also in terms of concerns about whether or not the program will be funded every year. Yes, every year, in order for us to be able to, or for this program to help 4,000 students, they do need to raise $25 million in donations. But those donations are 100% tax credit for donors, up to 50% of their state tax liability. And so we're not particularly worried about that at this point. It seems very likely that $25 million will be funded pretty quickly and pretty easily. It certainly has been the case in other states that have similar programs. So we're hopeful that that will happen very quickly this year and will be something that happens pretty easily every year. Let's see here. Danielle says that she would qualify at either the 100% or 200% free and reduced lunch rate, but is asking whether or not she should also get her child's IEP established for better chances. Danielle, I would say that if you feel like your child needs an IEP, then you should certainly consider going through that process because it will certainly help your child have some services that they may not have at this point. But to qualify for this scholarship, you do not need to do that. It's an either or situation, so you can either qualify based on income or based on IEP. You do not need to have both, and having both does not give you any special preferential treatment. The only preferential treatment in the law is that they do award scholarships first to students that are at the 100% of the free and reduced lunch rate and students that have an IEP. And then if there are funds left over, then they distribute those funds to students at the 200% of the free and reduced lunch rate. So if you qualify based on 200% of the free and reduced lunch rate and want the best chance, then yes, you might want to consider doing the IEP. And then Monica Alexander is asking, how are the funds distributed for use? This is currently also one of those unknowns. The Treasurer's Office has to figure out a vendor that they're going to use to distribute the funds for the EAOs. And it may be in the form of a debit card, although we've heard that that seems to be unlikely at this point. It may be in the form of a bank account that can have direct transfers to schools out of. Hopefully we will know more about that here in the next month as the Treasurer's Office finalizes that. And then Dolan Hornbeck asks, maybe I missed it, but when is the opening day for applications? This is also an unknown. We are hopeful that applications will open late spring, early summer. But because this is the first year of the program, we have to wait for the EAOs to be fully formed and get all of their ducks in a row before they're able to open up the application process.